Hey, Rick Jordan is here from rickjordan.tv. Rick is a magnetic force and he is an unyielding CEO. And he clawed his way to the top through relentless determination and hard-earned wisdom. He is a sought-after personality. He appears on CBS, Fox, News Nation, so many other places. He's a badass keynote speaker, but Rick founded ReachOut and took it from startup to public company without the influence of outside money from private equity. He works with Mr. Kevin Harrington. He consults the White House. He has hot podcasts all in with Rick Jordan. So we're going to find out from Mr. Rick himself how to do it, how to get motivated, how to stay focused, how to do what needs to be done without kind of going off on the wrong path, right? Without having the life imbalance, being out of whack, without being a terrible person, so you can change the world, get to where you want to go, achieve so much. So Rick, glad to be speaking with you.
Robert, my man, thanks for having me on.
Glad to have you. You're not too good to appear on my little old podcast, and I'm very appreciative. And so we introduced you a little bit, but in your own words, what really has you just like so excited, fired up these days?
Man, I mean, from that perspective, it's always purpose driven, So it's a lot of things, because I've got a new project that I'm starting that's part of Reach Out that's called Trustless. It's blockchain security, and it's something that I know it has the potential to be world changing as well. At least that's what a lot of investors are telling me right now when I tell them what's going on. And it's trying to protect a lot of people's identities, secure data exchange, things like how the US Treasury was hacked a couple of weeks ago or months ago, whenever that was. It was very recent. Something like this would have prevented that from taking place in the beginning. So there's a lot of cool applications for something like this. So I'm pumped, man, because it's got all these investors that I'm talking with, the ones that I really want to work with, and they're even kind of pitching me on this, are the ones that actually want to do something good for other people. Like it has a real human application to it, to just general life. It's not about making all the money. It's like, maybe Elon Musk wants to make the money. I don't know. I just think that he was always like, I can solve a problem, because you look at how long it took Tesla to even get to how big they are today, brother. And I see this all the time, how long it took McDonald's to get to where they were. But beyond that, dude, my kids, they're incredible. And it's like my daughter and my son are twins. They're the two older ones. They're 17 now. They're going to be done with high school here in just a little bit. One of them's definitely going to New York. She's going to be on Broadway. She already got accepted into AMDA. He's looking at agents out in New York right now, trying to do the same thing, just a different route to access the same opportunities. It's really cool, man. Trying to see where my kids are going to go. And I was crying, dude, if I can keep going on this a little bit, at my daughter's audition for AMDA. Yeah, because it's like I'm sitting there and I see all these other kids, but she ended up auditioning, getting accepted, and getting a scholarship on top of that, just based off of her audition. Because
Nice.
of how much she really put into it and the work that she's done over the years to build up her portfolio in this. And it's like, holy moly! It's like, I know for a fact, and I say this with all the humility in the world, dude, that if I wasn't doing the things that I was doing, like if I compromised or sacrificed, or even better yet, a better word is minimized myself and just chose not to go after things that I knew that I could do, no matter how hard or difficult they are. But I'm like, nah, I just want it a little bit easier, right? I just want to have something that's a path of least resistance so that I can make a decent income. And then that's it. I'll just go to work, pay bills, sleep, and die. If I had done that, I know that my kids wouldn't be going after things like this, and putting themselves out there very similarly to how I have. And it's like, for that day, dude, I felt very justified and validated as a dad. And it's like,
Of course.
that's why I do what I do. I want to forge the path for other people to see that it's like, oh, a kid that had his dad die when he was 16, that grew up stupid poor, had next to no money, started at McDonald's, right? Which is actually where I learned sales. You want fries with that. The art of the upsell, one of my favorite lines ever, has the ability to do pretty much whatever he wants to. I'm not saying I'm going to be a carpenter. I suck at hanging cabinets. I've tried it before, horrible, not a natural talent of mine, but anything that I have the ability for, that I can hone in on the skill set, absolutely I can get it done. And that means that anybody can do it too.
Very nice. There's so many good lessons built in there, right? Like you raised your kids right. You were a good role model. You achieved for yourself. And so they pick up on that and they see that. And you think about the ripple effect. You think about how many other lives you changed, right? People that you haven't even
Yeah.
met, people that you have seen you speak at your speaking events. And it's got to feel good, right? That you're making the world better than when you found it. It's like when you go camping, right? They say, well, if you find garbage, bring it in, but don't leave your own garbage out there. And that's what we all want to do. But it's really easy for the negativity to creep in, right? It's really easy to say like,
Yeah.
oh, well, like, what have I achieved? Am I taking a risk? Am I doing enough? I don't have enough time. All these excuses. And I mean, we all deal with it. So like, what's your secret? How do you do what needs to be done and really like stay excited and focused when all the like sometimes self-doubt or self-sabotage tries to fight us?
Yeah, that still happens, brother. Seriously, because I'm a highly motivated, high achieving, high performing dude. But I still like in this very chair here, because as we were talking a little bit before we hit record, it's like this is my backup studio, which is in my office, because my actual studio for my show has some new equipment being installed. But even in this very chair here, there are times, dude, to where I will sit and look at the screen. I'll hop over to Amazon, when there's just other shit that I should be doing. Yeah, so there are times to where that stuff still creeps in. So the question on how to stay motivated is you start to learn specific things to your personality style. Like for me, I started recognizing it's like there's a huge toxicity that exists when it comes to hustle culture, right? It's like the
Yeah.
grind is glorified. And this is something that really helped me. I hope it helps people who are listening to you and I right now is that you think that you have to just hard work all the damn time. And while that's true to an extent, it's like putting everything you have in, but it's like I'm the all-in CEO, man. My show's all in. That's my mantra. And I rediscovered what all in actually means. All in means as long as you're bringing everything you have to the table that day, right? So there's days, man, to where you might have had something horrible happen the day before, right? I can imagine like taking myself back to 16 years old when my dad died. It's like that day, dude, I don't have 100% of me to bring. Yeah, and same. It's like something happens. It's like if something bad happens to you, and I'm not so keen on Tony Robbins. It's like life is happening for you, not to you. Bro, there's shit that happens to you, that is like
Right.
beyond your control, right? The self-sabotage you're talking about absolutely is within your control. But there's stuff. It's like tornadoes wipe out people's homes, right? There's nothing you can do about that, man. Like it's
Right.
outside of your control. My dad dying from leukemia, nothing I can do about that. Those are things that happen to me. But in those times where you don't feel that motivated, it's like, what do you have to bring today? Dude, if you might have just 40%, you might have just 30%. But if you're bringing every bit of that to the table that day, you brought everything you have that day. And that means that you're all in because you still are absolutely human. You're not expected to be this grinder every single day. Yeah. So what I've discovered, it's like if there's really important things for me to get done, because there are just things that are just really important, time sensitive, urgent, important, all of those wonderful categories, right? That all the daily planners talk to us about over the years. Yeah. If I come in and I've got three major things I have to do and I get them done by 11 o'clock in the morning, dude, I won the day, right? That's it. Now, the rest of the day is something that I can just do what I want to do in essence, meaning I can work on other projects. I can go talk to some of the other people in my company and see what they're working on, see what I can improve, see different processes that I could establish, go down a route that I've never been before, come up with some brand new stuff like Trustless, right? That I'm telling you about,
Right.
have some creative time. This is all still being all in because I'm still working, quote unquote. Absolutely. But then I'm able to guide my energy into places to where I know I can create. And I think that's what people miss out on is that you work so hard at the stuff, you forget to leave that time to still let yourself create and be creative. Just like when you were a kid, the time when you take out the crayons and the coloring book and just go to town and that was it. Or go outside, the equivalent of, just running outside and rolling around in the grass. Yeah,
Yeah.
that same time, which is still extremely productive. So for me, it's like, cool, maybe it's a day to where I'll go drop a couple of solo podcasts and batch those because I'm just feeling inspired after I got the major stuff done for the day. Yeah. Doing all that helps you stay motivated because it's things you're passionate about. I hate this stuff just like anybody else that I'm not passionate about, dude. That's why
Right.
I failed English in high school. I didn't do homework. I just hated homework. I failed a couple other classes too because I just hated doing the stuff that I just didn't want to do. I found no point to it. I understood the concepts and then I moved on. Public school is probably not the best route for me.
Sure.
But now it's like that's the importance of it is I find what really drives my passion and then I try to stay in those lanes and I hire for the stuff that I don't like because maybe that's somebody else's lane and they really, really love all those things. Like accountants, dude. I could never stare and look at numbers all day long like my auditors for the public company. Not me, man. I'd probably shoot myself. So good for them. They can do that. And I'll stay over here podcasting, speaking on stages, coming up with brand new cybersecurity ideas, going to the White House, all of that stuff.
Yeah, you stay in your zone and you don't force it and you cut yourself a break, but you
Yeah.
also show up the best you can. Like you said, even if you're the 30, 40%, that you show up with that. And I used to not really take that idea seriously, right? You mentioned about like
Yeah.
kind of failing classes, like the teenage years, especially when someone would say, just do the best you can, when your teenager brain kind of says like, oh, that means I don't really have to try, right? That just means like
Yeah.
someone might be fooled into their observation is that I'm doing the best I can. But what you're saying is once we're adults and we can make our own choices and we have this self-awareness, then, and we're only kind of, in a lot of ways, only accountable to ourselves, then we need to be honest and act with integrity and really just like show up in the way that we say. But it doesn't mean the hustling necessarily or working ourselves to death. It means like doing what is moving your passion forward, like what's getting you to your goals. And like you said, it might mean cut yourself a break or work on the big
Yeah.
picture, work on the other stuff. And it's a lot to navigate, right? A lot to untangle, especially if we have not been thinking in this way that you are talking about. And so with all the people that you've helped, right? You've done the speaking, you did the podcasting. Is there a particular problem you see that's out there that maybe isn't being taken seriously enough, or maybe is there something, some kind of like topic you're like outspoken about?
Yeah, dude. I mean, totally. I mean, the one that always comes to the top of my mind is the same one that's been in my mind for 20 years. It's like I'm 45 now. So I'm saying all the way back to my early 20s. I noticed it back then and it's still the same today. Is that the age group like 18 to 25. I fucking love that age group. At the same time, it's an age group that by society as a culture is all of a sudden expected to just figure out their entire life in just a very short time span. Because let's look at how our education system is set up. And this isn't a political statement at all. It's like just the transition of events in the timeline. You go from high school, like where my kids are right now, and then all of a sudden, within like a 6-month time period, you're supposed to figure out a major, right? Because you're supposed to quote unquote go to college. That idea is thank God it's trickling away a little bit now, right? Because it's
Yeah,
not, especially today's world, man. I mean, AI, cybersecurity, it's like you can learn so much faster and so much better by other routes. But dude,
yeah.
lawyers, accountants, doctors, please go to school. Please.
Yes,
I,
if you're
I want
operating
you
on
to
me,
be
yes.
exactly. I want you to be board certified. I want you to be barred if you're a
Yeah.
lawyer. I want you to know your numbers for the SEC if you're going to help my public company. Okay, so it's all those. Yes, go to school, but for almost everything else, I don't think it's really the right way. But still, it's a societal thing. Ever since the boomers, is you're supposed to have your life figured out within these 6 months. But when I say your life, like figure out what you're going to do for the rest of your life. And by the
Right.
way, within that same 6-month period, you turn 18. All of a sudden, guess what? Legally, you're an adult and you're expected to be fully responsible for yourself, too.
Yeah.
And not that I'm saying that 18-year-olds can't be. I actually think more like 10-year-olds can be fully responsible for themselves. My kids were doing laundry by themselves when they were 7 years old. My daughter was cooking for everybody when they were 10. So, I mean, they're very self-sufficient and independent. At the same time, there's a lot of new things. You can sign legal contracts now. You can get a lease on an apartment like my daughter's looking to do. All of these things. Oh, by the way, you're expected to be mature. In most states, you can now own a rifle. You can't own a handgun yet, but you can own a rifle when you're 18. So there's so many things that get thrust upon you during that age group between 18 to 25 that it just like totally pollutes the brain. Whereas for me, it's like, I look at my kids, it's like, let's say that my daughter goes into Broadway, right? And she loves it, right? She's there for 20 years. Cool. That's awesome. What if she goes into it? She's like, after 5 years, she's like, you know what? I don't want to do that anymore. I'm like, great. What do you want to do now? I'll get excited too. Either way, I'm going to get excited for it because I think during your 20s, you need to try as much as you possibly can to figure yourself out. Don't pressure yourself with the expectation that you have to have it all figured out within a 6 month period or even a 6 year period from that 18 to 25 year mark to just carry that through the rest of your existence on this planet. No, have experiences, man. Figure things out. When you get in your 30s, you might want to look at locking some shit down a little more, to try to build your empire, whatever that empire means to you, going all in somewhere. Absolutely. But during your 20s, man, especially early 20s, do everything you possibly can. Fall on your face as much as you can. Do as many cool things as you possibly can during that time period.
I love it. And this all in concept, like it takes a little bit of education, understanding to really feel it, right?
Yeah,
Because like a lot of people, they don't go all in because they're afraid of these irreversible decisions, so to speak. But you're young, a
totally.
lot of things are irreversible, or they quit when it gets just a little bit hard, and that's no way to live life. And everything you're describing, it kind of seems like it's a recipe for stress, right? It's a recipe of when you're 25, you're harkening back to when it was when you were 15, and when you're
Yeah.
35, you're harkening back to when it's 25, and you're never living in the present, right? It's always in the past or the future, and we don't want that. And so, to help us really understand you and what you're all about, well, we love the struggle stories here. Mr. Rick, do you have a struggle story that you love talking about that you'd like to tell us about?
Yeah, man. I mean, it was the one I'll go back to was when there's several in the life, and I think in order to be something that's kind of world changing, there's probably several moments of your life that you're going to have struggles with, and they'll all come out with stories. I started Reach Out when I was laid off from Best Buy right when my twins were born. Yeah, so that's
Ooh.
one that I always talk about. So now all of a sudden a family of two is instantly a family of four, and I have no job. Yeah, so during that time period, it's like home was being foreclosed on. I was running an extension cord out the window of the condo to plug it into a landscape outlet to keep the refrigerator going because there was breast milk in there for my twins. Trying to wonder where the next dollar would come from. Then going into the my mid 30s was a health scare, not just scare, but I mean like almost something very catastrophic with a gangrenous gallbladder. 45-minute surgery turned into 3.5 hours because it was dead. It was a zombie organ that was plaguing me for 8 months straight. Nobody could figure out what it was going on until I was on an operating table, ready to die. Just horrendous, man. But out of that, it's like you talk about like the what we were saying before with the just working, paying bills and dying. I was making a good income with Reach Out when I started it, during those first 5 years. But when this hit, man, so it wasn't just a crisis or a struggle with my health. It was a struggle with my mind at that point too, because I started to get comfortable, dude. I started to be like, oh, this is cool. I can, coming from no job, next to no money, growing up poor, it's like I've got some money, got a great house, I got kids, I'm paying all my bills, I got disposable income, I can travel whenever I want. This is pretty cool. Totally different, right? But then when you get to the point to where you're like, oh man, I was just on the operating table for 3.5 hours. The previous 8 months were a living hell for me because I had no idea if I was going to live or die or what was even going on. No doctor could figure it out. You come out of that and it's like, man, my focus was totally wrong. I was so like self-centered, and I think there's a difference because selfish is a big word that's trending these days, right? You
Right.
got to be selfish. You got to think of you. And that's absolutely correct, right? You have to definitely prioritize your own well-being. Most definitely. It's like sacrifices I think are the only things you should do are for your kids. Seriously, because you're responsible for them, of course, up to a certain age. That's it. So yeah, you'll sacrifice some things for your kids. However, there's a big difference between being selfish, right, and focusing on your own priority and being self-centered to where there's not much else that you care about except what's going on with you. And that's the mode that I was in. And it was a bad mode to be in, man. Maybe that's what caused the illness. I don't know. If I were to get all energetic on us today, I'm not going to go that down that road, but it's just a thought process, a hypothetical. So after that, dude, I came out of it. I was like, life is so much more and I'm meant for so much more. I'm meant to actually help more people than what I currently am. Why have I not been living up to what I know is my own potential? And I started going through all the reasons. So it wasn't just a physical crisis, man. It was a mental crisis too. And I had to figure that out over the next 2 to 3 years. And at that point, it's like my first rule that I gave for myself was just say yes. So it's like if anything came across my plate, I'm like, yep. So it's like the 20s that I was talking about, the early 20s, which I didn't do during that time period. I started doing that in my mid 30s.
Cool.
And then I was like, man, okay, anything comes across, I'm going to try it. I'm going to see what happens. Even if it like crashes the business, kills my income, I don't care. Now at this time, I got a family of 5, but whatever comes across my plate, I'm saying yes to it. I'm just going to see what happens because it's going to give me experience. It's going to give me some cool insight into me, not the world necessarily, but into me, what really drives me. And that's where I figured out it's like, I really want to help billions of people, bro. Seriously. Like that's the thing. That's what fulfills me. Seeing people go from A to B and then throughout the rest of their life and having some kind of transformation in the midst of all that.
Well, that's great. And speaking of transformations, it's always difficult when you're in the middle of it, right? But it's useful to apply this thinking that you're saying of like, okay, well, whatever you're going through now, whatever the crisis is, once you get out of it, then think about how much will have changed. And maybe even leading up to the crisis, maybe you did get a little fat and happy and comfortable. Maybe you did take a few things for granted. And then now it's time to apply the gratitude, right? And appreciate what's there and to maybe let
Yeah.
go of some of that baggage and that limiting thinking. It's like if an asteroid almost hits the Earth, it's like, well, was it a near hit or a near miss, right? You
Yeah, right
almost
on.
died from the gallbladder thing, and are you going to be mad that you almost died, or are you going to be glad that you lived through it and it puts you on a different course? And so we want to be on that different course. And you've given us so much to think about already, Mr. Rick. And we mentioned a few times how you have Trustless, but you also have Reach Out. So can you tell us about these companies? Like if someone is listening to you and they want to find out about, well, what are these companies about? What's the solution? Am I a fit for it? What's Reach Out all about?
Yeah, Reach Out is a cybersecurity company, an IT support company. It started out just as IT support, 15 years ago now, before cyber was really a mainstream thing. And then, of course, we transitioned into that over the years, gained the skill sets. I had a lot going on with security even before then in different jobs that I was in. Now, absolutely, that was the baby that I started, right? Built up the business, and then now we grow by both acquisition and sales. But I took it public, bro, and it's because as an MSP, which is a managed service provider, we wanted to really hit the nail on the head for this entire industry, kind of because it's fragmented, right? There's a lot of quote unquote IT guys that don't necessarily have all the competencies they need. It's like, what's the best way to stay up with the times? I'm like, well, that's to be big, right? In order to have the right resources, you got to be big to obtain all those resources.
Sure.
So if that's the case, and I started looking around, it's like nobody's ever taken a company like this public before. I'm like, why is that the case? So I started looking into it even more. I'm like, okay, I see the difficulties and the struggles that come out of taking a company public, but there's also these benefits too. And while it was a tough path, man, I mean, it took like 3 years, of hard work while the business was still growing just on the going public efforts to get to the point to where we could be like, yep, we're good now. And that really just happened probably about 2 weeks ago is when we finally closed out on the entire reverse merger process. That part took 15 months in and of itself. Yeah, so if people want to find out more about it, of course, you can go to any of my personal pages because it's referenced there. rickjordan.tv, Mr. Rick Jordan, which is Instagram and LinkedIn. But the website for Reach Out is reachoutit.com. Trustless does not have a public presence yet because we just announced it about 13 days ago when I was interviewed on a podcast. It was strategically, just like right now when it was strategically released on that day. And it's something that's going to make some waves coming up soon here because it's a really cool blockchain security project that has a lot of application from the Department of Defense all the way down to estate planning, for elderly people, like those bank accounts, like, the wife, Betty, didn't know that Ron had that credit union account and all of a sudden he's passed away and she can't access the money in there. So real world problems are going to be solved through something like this with a lot of security behind it.
Very amazing. Well, you're on that rocket ship to success, and we have the algorithms now, we have the technology, we have people kind of wrapping their heads
Yeah.
around the blockchain and these new ways of acting. And it's amazing times we're living in, and many more amazing times to come. So we said that's reachoutit.com. and rickjordan.tv to find out more about Rick and his amazing cybersecurity company, his incredible ideas, his motivation, his speaking, all that cool stuff. Because what are you going to do? Watch reality TV or listen to someone who can get you to those entrepreneurial goals to pursue the hard things, like you just there mentioned, Rick, about how it's like, well, if there's a lot of work and a lot of reward, then that's something to pursue. Don't just go the easy path just because there's some hard work involved. Go and do those hard things, solve those big problems, get your team, get big, and make the deals and be social and get the achievements happening, all that cool stuff. And so as people are headed to rickjordan.tv and reachoutit.com here, Mr. Rick, it's the scary part of the show. It's the time when we try to put you on the spot and stump you and ask for a fun quote or lesson that has served you in life or business that you want to pass along to us. So what comes to mind for a fun quote or lesson?
Yeah, absolutely. I love quotes. If you follow me on Instagram, you're going to see that I write quotes and I post them on there all the time. One that goes back years, and I don't take credit for this, I didn't write it, but one that really honed me in on the need for coaches and mentors was the only reason I'm at where I'm at today is because of the coaches and mentors I've had along the way.
It rhymes. Very
It does.
nice.
I know. Yeah. I'm an
The only
original Dr. Seuss today, right?
Yep, but I mean, rhyming's memorable. Just ask Billy Mays. So that's very
Yeah, right
powerful
on.
and helpful, right? Your mentors and
Yep.
coaches got you to where you are, but you said it way better. And you can find out more about Mr. Rick at Mr. Rick Jordan on Instagram and LinkedIn. All in on Rick Jordan, all in with Rick Jordan, all in on Rick Jordan. That's a whole other thing. All in with
That's a
Jordan.
fun one too, right?
Yeah, that's the podcast. And if you're a podcast listener, which you probably are because you're listening to a podcast, tune into Mr. Rick Jordan, and that way you can find out about all the cutting edge stuff that he's got going on, right? There's blockchain this, there's reverse merger that. So get in touch with Rick and stay informed. rickjordan.tv, reachoutit.com. And thank you very much, Mr. Rick, while the real studio is being renovated, for showing up, delivering some amazing value. I was really impressed, and thank you for being here.
Thanks, Robert. Appreciate you.
All right, super.